Welcome to my channel. She was the Air Force's golden pilot, until one reckless mission got her grounded. But when two top generals are captured behind enemy lines, Captain Elise Ward is the only one crazy enough to attempt the impossible. A one-woman strike through a death corridor, defying every rule in the book. This is the story of the pilot who rewrote the sky itself. They said I was the best flyer in the 7th Air Tactical Wing, until I wasn't. My name is Captain Elise Ward, and for 3 weeks, I've been grounded at Fort Arden Air Base in Nevada. Not because I failed a mission, but because I succeeded in one they didn't approve of. I saved 12 men trapped in a kill zone north of the Iranian border, but I did it by defying direct orders. And that's where the Air Force drew the line. Colonel Soren Graves reviewed the mission footage himself. I still remember his voice when he called me in. Your flying is precise, Ward. But your disregard for command protocol puts everyone at risk. You're grounded indefinitely. That was it. The golden pilot of Viper Squadron, the one who held the top flight record for 2 years straight, reduced to leaning on a railing, watching other jets tear across the sky without her. My F-35, Seraph, sits under wraps in Hangar 4, engine cold, waiting like I am. Fort Arden runs like a machine. F-22s slice across the desert sky in formation, their afterburners screaming. Ground crews hustle over the sunburnt tarmac like a choreographed storm. It's beautiful in its efficiency. And for me, it's torture. Every sortie they run without me is a reminder of what I've lost, not medals or rank, but purpose. Still haunting the deck, Captain, came a voice I actually didn't mind hearing. Lieutenant Rena Halvorsen strolled up with 2 coffees. One of the few who hadn't distanced herself since the review board's decision. Just admiring the view, I said, accepting the coffee. The view of dust collecting on Seraph, or the view of pilots following orders you were born to break? I gave a tight smile. They follow the manual. I followed my gut. Big difference. She leaned beside me, her eyes following the F-22s preparing for another routine flyover. Elise, what you did out there wasn't reckless. It was necessary. 12 soldiers owe their lives to you. Tell that to Graves, I muttered. I did, Rena said flatly. Didn't change anything. I'd replayed that day 1,000 times. Intelligence had said minimal resistance, just a light recon sweep. But Alpha Team walked into a death trap. Bunkers, elevated enemy fire, and no cover. Artillery support was 20 minutes out. They wouldn't have lasted 5. So I dove in literally. Cut altitude like a falcon, pulling my F-35 into a vertical descent, guns hot. I thread that jet through a canyon tighter than a missile chute. Hit every target, pulled them out with nothing but instinct and nerve. They came home, but I'd broken chain of command and risked a multi-million-dollar aircraft. And so, I was grounded, not for failing to save lives, but for doing it the wrong way. That morning, I thought it'd be like every other since the review, watching someone else fly the missions I used to own. But then Sergeant Harris came running. Captain Ward, he said, breathless. Colonel Graves is asking for you in command. It's urgent. I blinked. Sergeant, I'm still grounded. Orders changed. Colonel asked for you by name. Rena and I exchanged a look. The kind that says something's off. Whatever this was, it wasn't routine. And suddenly, for the first time in weeks, my pulse kicked up. Command was buzzing when I walked in. Not the usual hum of routine briefings or post-flight chatter. This was tension. Real, electric, pulse-quickening tension. Pilots filled every seat. Some leaned against walls. Others hovered near the giant display screen that lit the room in blue and red glows. Intel analysts, drone techs, and operations officers huddled over laptops. Even General Huxley, the usually unseen strategic overseer of Western Air Command, stood near the back. Colonel Graves, always rigid, always composed, looked anything but. Ladies and gentlemen, he started, voice taut. This is not a drill. At 0431 hours, a diplomatic convoy traveling through the Alcavir Highlands was ambushed. 2 high-value targets were taken. The screen lit up, showing satellite overlays of a rugged mountain region in central Tehran, a country wedged between chaos and oil, where peace only held by fragile thread. My gut clenched before I even saw their names. Captured, Graves continued. Our General Simone Harrow, chair of the Joint Defense Council, and General Youssef Salim, NATO Command Deputy. They were on an unannounced inspection tour of forward outposts. The air in the room tightened like a vice. 2 4-star generals. Captured. That wasn't just a loss. It was a propaganda gold mine for the enemy. If they were paraded on camera, bruised and bound, the fallout could tear alliances apart. Recovery teams failed, Graves said grimly. 2 Blackhawks shot down. 1 F-16 neutralized mid-flight. Ground routes are impassable. Airspace is locked tight with layered SAM nests and jamming towers. The screen zoomed in on the red-blotted terrain. A single compound nestled in the fold of a mountain basin, invisible to satellites until a drone caught a heat signature through smoke. Every standard route was blocked. Current intel estimates we have 6 hours before relocation. After that, their extraction becomes unlikely. Major Riker spoke from the second row. Sir, are we authorized for hard breach? Negative, Graves said. Our priority is rescue, not elimination. I leaned forward, studying the topography. A textbook nightmare. Narrow approaches, anti-air blind spots, fortified ridgelines. The kind of compound built to repel airstrike doctrine. But as Graves laid out options, none worked. Every plan ended with another downed bird, another dead crew. I raised my hand. Sir, permission to speak? He hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead, Captain Ward. The terrain makes conventional strike impossible, I said, stepping toward the screen. But what if we stop being conventional? A low-altitude run, masked by canyon walls. No radar, no warning. Drop in below the coverage net. We hit the main defenses before they can lock on. The room went quiet. Major Riker frowned. You're talking nap of the Earth flying at Mach 1. In a canyon system we barely have mapped. You screw up, you're a hole in a mountain. I'm saying we either try something insane, or we lose 2 generals. The margin for error is 0, but it already is. Graves looked me dead in the eyes. Captain Ward, you're still under review for insubordination. Yes, sir. And you're volunteering for a mission that may kill you. I'm not volunteering, sir. I'm stating the obvious. This mission only works if someone's crazy enough to try what doesn't exist in the manual. He was quiet. Everyone was. Eyes bounced between Graves and me like a tennis match no one wanted to see end. Finally, Graves turned to the room. Everyone else, continue planning. Ward, step outside. I followed him into the corridor. No words. Just the slam of the door behind us. He faced me. I need the truth, Elise. That maneuver in Iranian airspace. Was it instinct or showboating? I didn't flinch. Instinct. Training didn't cover the kill zone those men were trapped in. I acted. And I'd do it again. Graves studied me. Long quiet. Then, can you pull this off? I've spent 3 weeks grounded, running hypothetical strikes in my head. I know every canyon in that terrain pack. I know Seraph inside out. Yes, sir. I can do this. Another pause. A big one. If you fail, he said quietly, it won't just be your career that ends. It'll be mine. I nodded. Then let's not fail. Colonel Graves returned to the briefing room like a man who had made peace with a bad bet, the kind you don't place because you're sure it'll win, but because all the others are guaranteed to lose. He stepped to the front and said the words no one expected. Change of plans. Captain Ward will execute a single aircraft strike to breach the compound defenses and create an extraction window. A beat of silence. Then murmurs. Heads turned. Confused stares. Even the intel staff froze mid-gesture. Major Riker spoke up first, his tone respectful but edged. Sir, Ward is still under disciplinary review. Graves didn't blink. Review suspended until mission completion. She's the only one here with the flight profile needed. I felt every eye on me. Some were skeptical, others stunned. A few, like Rena, were quietly nodding. It wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about redemption or proving anything. 2 of the highest-ranking generals in NATO were prisoners in a kill box, and I was the only pilot with both the nerve and the knowledge to punch through. Captain Ward, Graves said, you have 15 minutes to review intel and prep for launch. Your bird's being pulled from hangar now. I didn't hesitate. While the others continued planning secondary routes, I was already halfway down the flight deck, heart pounding in rhythm with the engines I could already hear. Hangar 4 was alive. Seraph, my F-35, wasn't draped under tarps anymore. She was surrounded by technicians, loaders, avionics specialists, all moving with the urgency of a crew that had just been told a miracle needed prepping. Chief Delgado, my lead mechanic for 5 years, met me near the nose cone. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. "She's prepped for maximum precision," he said, nodding toward her. "Targeting software upgraded, munitions dialed in to the meter. You're running hot and tight." "How's she feel?" I asked, placing my hand gently on the fuselage. Delgado smiled faintly. "Like she's been waiting to wake up since the moment they grounded you. I went over every system myself. I always did. Throttle response, control surfaces, oxygen supply, internal diagnostics, and AV relays. Every screen had to glow green. Not good enough. Perfect." Inside the cockpit, something clicked in my chest, a familiar hum that wasn't part of the jet but part of me. My breath settled. My fingers curled instinctively around the throttle and stick. My helmet sealed. HUD came alive, painting the world in synthetic lines and symbols. This was home. "Tower, this is Seraph 1. Requesting clearance for immediate departure." "Seraph 1, you are cleared hot. Godspeed, Captain." I launched like a knife thrown from a god's hand. The afterburner kicked in, slamming me into the seat. Nevada's desert plains shrank below as I tore into the stratosphere. I didn't look back. This wasn't a patrol. This wasn't a show of force. This was a one-woman strike through a death corridor. As I broke over the North Atlantic, Command updated the mission file through the SAT link. Enemy reinforcements had been spotted moving in. More SAMs, more mobile batteries, more reasons to abort. But they weren't pulling me back. "Seraph 1, this is Overwatch. Compound is in sight. SAM grid active. Confirm when you begin final run." "Copy, Overwatch. Entering approach phase now." I dropped altitude fast, 30,000 feet to 600 in under 90 seconds. The mountains in eastern Tehran rose around me like jagged fangs. I adjusted course, skimming the canyon edges to stay hidden. One wrong move, and I'd be a crater. But this was where I thrived, where wind, terrain, and instinct spoke louder than rules. Overwatch's voice returned, low and tight. "Defenses are tighter than before. Recommend caution." "Negative," I said, recommending full send. I banked hard left and dove into the canyon. Stone blurred past my wings. My altimeter screamed. My pulse didn't. Ahead, tucked behind a rock bluff, was the compound. Enemy fire hadn't started because they hadn't seen me yet. And by the time they did, I'd already be inside their walls. I exploded from the canyon's shadow like thunder off the deck of the Earth. The compound sat dead ahead, its anti-air emplacements still pivoting to search the skies behind me, where they expected a jet to come from. But I wasn't following their playbook. I was writing a new one. HUD targets painted red diamonds across the screen, for SAM launchers, 2 radar dishes, and a bank of jammers. I toggled hardpoints. No time to savor. No room for style. This wasn't a show. Missile 1, radar uplink. 2, primary SAM tower. 3 and 4, flak positions tucked behind barracks. I launched all 4 in a tight burst, a quarter second between them. The moment they were away, I banked right and climbed over the valley's spine to avoid return fire. Flashes erupted behind me as the compound's core defenses crumpled. Their retaliatory fire came too late, blind, panicked, and poorly aimed. "Overwatch, defenses neutralized," I said. "Beginning support for extraction." "Copy, Seraph 1. Rescue teams en route." Confirmed intel. Generals are located in eastern structure, grid quadrant Charlie 5. I realigned and dropped altitude again, skimming low like a hawk. The compound below was chaos now. Enemy troops running for cover, some firing wildly into the air, others grabbing heavy weapons to return fire. They had no idea how fast their air superiority was gone. All they knew was something unseen had torn a hole in their fortress, and now death hovered overhead. I ran another targeting pass. Ground resistance was mobilizing, not retreating. That meant they were still confident they could stop the extraction. Bad guess. HUD lit up the building where Harrow and Salim were held. It was ringed with defensive squads, more than anticipated. They weren't holding them for ransom. They were using them as shields, possibly bait. Overwatch confirmed. Extraction team needs suppression. Can't insert under current fire density. Understood, I replied. I'm on it. This wasn't about dropping bombs and hoping for the best. I had to surgically dismantle an entire security ring without hitting the central structure or triggering a retaliatory execution. I activated Smart Trace. My targeting suite synced with thermal and motion signatures. Enemies, not walls. Each round selected the smallest margin of impact possible. I squeezed the trigger. A ripple of precision ordnance shot forward. High velocity, anti-personnel, low blast radius. It felt more like conducting an orchestra than launching an attack. Every shot hit with brutal, silent intent. Enemy gunners went down before they even knew they were being watched. Roof teams dropped. Barricades shattered. Not one shot touched the building where the generals were. Overwatch, path is clear. Copy. Rescue 1 inbound. 2 minutes to touchdown. From above, I watched the pair of UH-60s come in fast and low, rotors hammering through dust and smoke. A third team fast roped into the courtyard, moving with terrifying speed. They'd trained for nightmare scenarios. This qualified. Then I saw it. Movement from the North Ridge. Not just a squad, an entire armored column. For troop transports. 3 light tanks. Reinforcements. Late, but not too late to ruin everything. Overwatch, you seeing that? Affirmative. They're moving to resecure. Too fast for the rescue team to load and lift in time. My heart kicked into a new rhythm. Not fear, but urgency. There was only one move left. Seraph 1. I'm taking the ridge. Copy, Seraph. Your weapon's free. I turned toward the north, fire already warming in my veins. Let them send tanks. Let them send everyone. I wasn't finished. The ridge came up fast, steep, jagged, crawling with enemy armor. I saw the glint of turrets swinging toward me and the telltale shimmer of heat from missile tubes priming. They were expecting a gunship or a drone, not a jet moving like a phantom between cliffs. But I didn't give them time to adjust. I pushed Seraph into full combat posture. The F-35's engines howled as I climbed and rolled, twisting between rock faces. Every second I stayed in range, their tracking systems got smarter, but only if I let them. Target lock. Triple stack transports. I flipped to bunker busters. Not meant for mobile units. But if I dropped them just before the vehicles hit the slope, gravity would finish the job. I fired 2. Adjusted angle. Fired 2 more. Boom. The ridge cracked like thunder under a god's fist. Flames reached skyward. Metal burst in every direction. I banked right, narrowly missing the falling debris of a transport that rolled off the cliff and exploded midair. The tanks were slower, smarter. Their turrets tracked my path, trying to lead their shots. I juked left, hard, then suddenly cut the throttle and dropped. Gravity yanked me into a dive, engines roaring as the canyon walls blurred past. Missiles fired from the tank's positions soared overhead, aimed where I would have been. I didn't give them a second try. I pulled up with everything Seraph had, nose tilted toward the ridge's edge. As I crested it, I released my last payload, a twin precision strike into the lead tank's magazine. The secondary explosion took out the other 2. The entire enemy response on the north side vanished in fire. Overwatch, ridge is cleared. Repeat, ridge is down. Copy that, Seraph. Rescue team is loading now. I circled back, eyes darting across every possible counterattack path. But there was nothing. No air response. No SAMLOC. Just the burn of distant smoke and the fading screams of a broken compound. Through the canopy glass, I watched the extraction unfold. Special ops teams hustled the 2 generals, Simone Harrow and Youssef Salim, from the compound's eastern side. Both were limping but upright, flanked by armed operators who moved like shadows. They didn't hesitate. No second guesses. Every second counted. The Hellos were lifting now, one by one, rotors slicing smoke trails. I tracked their paths automatically, ready to put myself between them and anything that dared follow. But nothing came. Just silence. Heavy, sudden, sacred. Seraph 1, Rescue 1, came the call. Both packages secured. Mission complete. We're airborne. I didn't answer right away. Just watched them fade into the distance, their dark hulls growing smaller against the endless desert. That's when I let myself breathe. Only then. The desert sun hung low on the horizon by the time I crossed back into friendly airspace. Seraph purred beneath me, steady and unshaken, as if she hadn't just danced through hell. The mission timer blinked quietly on my HUD, 4 hours, 26 minutes since liftoff. Every minute of it etched into muscle and memory. Seraph 1, this is Fort Arden Tower. You are cleared for landing. Welcome home, Captain. Copy, Tower, I replied, voice even. The words felt heavier than they should. Welcome home. After 3 weeks of exile on the flight deck, it didn't feel like home anymore. Not yet. But I guided Seraph down with a grace that surprised even me. The wheels kissed the tarmac like they knew it was sacred. The moment I began taxiing, I saw them. The entire Viper squadron was assembled along the edge of the runway. Pilots, techs, command staff. Even a few ground crew who usually avoided anything that wasn't a checklist or a fuel line. And standing in front of them, Colonel Graves, arms crossed, face unreadable. I popped the canopy, unbuckled, and climbed out slowly. Helmet in hand, flight suit soaked in sweat, I stood tall atop the wing. No one spoke. For a few long seconds, there was just wind and dust and silence. Then Graves stepped forward. Captain Ward, mission report. I met his eyes. Both generals secured. Compound defenses neutralized. No friendly losses. Another beat of silence. Then, in a voice stripped of its usual bark, he said, 3 weeks ago, I grounded you for reckless disregard of protocol. Yes, sir. And today, that same recklessness saved 2 of our highest-ranking military leaders. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I'd heard all the lectures. I'd lived them. But this time, Graves didn't launch into reprimands. Instead, he spoke with something closer to, wait, experience. We need pilots who follow orders, who stick to plans. But we also need ones who know when the plan is already broken. You walked that line today, Captain. He took a step closer. Which is why, effective immediately, your disciplinary review is closed. You're reinstated to full flight status. My breath hitched just slightly. Thank you, sir. Graves gave a small nod. Don't thank me yet. You're being assigned to advanced tactical training. You'll teach the others how to fly the impossible without killing themselves. And you'll also attend protocol refresher courses. I gave a crooked smile. Work on my paperwork skills. Understood. He stepped back and turned toward the squadron. Dismissed. As the group dispersed, some nodding toward me, others just watching, I climbed down from Seraph and walked slowly toward the hangar. Rena met me halfway, her eyes a mix of awe and relief. You actually did it, she said. We did it, I corrected. Without you keeping that coffee hot, I might not have made it through briefing. She snorted. That's one hell of a debrief gift. But my mind was already drifting. The 2 generals would go home. Their families would never know how close they came to being names on a wall. And no one would ever publicly talk about what happened today. Official reports would call it a coordinated air and ground operation. My name? A footnote, if mentioned at all. And I was okay with that. Because I'd flown through fire to bring them back. And because Seraph had waited 3 weeks for her moment, just like I had. They gave me a classroom. Not a big one. Just a briefing space repurposed into a tactical simulator lab. At first, it felt like a punishment with a prettier name. Lead the advanced strike training, they said. Help the next generation of flyers think beyond doctrine, within reason. The last part always came with a glance from Colonel Graves. Still, I took the role seriously. I knew what it felt like to have instincts that didn't match the manual. And I knew the difference between flying bold and flying blind. All right, I said to the 6 pilots gathered in the simulator bay. Who here thinks combat flying is about reading the book? A couple hands started to raise, then hesitated. Wrong answer, I said before they could commit. Combat flying is about knowing the book so well you know when to throw it out. That got their attention. I pulled up a satellite map on the screen, the compound from Tehran, now labeled only as Objective Red Echo. The mission itself was classified. I stripped all names and outcomes from the data. What mattered was the problem solving, not the history. This terrain gives you one route in. It's narrow, has no egress, and it's laced with SAM nests. Now tell me, what's the standard protocol? High-altitude suppression, followed by coordinated drone fire, said Lieutenant Marks. Exactly, I said, which is why it failed 3 times before we changed the approach. I paced slowly in front of them. Your jets aren't just machines. They're extensions of your judgment. You don't just fly them, you think with them. Every ridge, every updraft, every missile lock is a question. Your answer? That's the difference between a mission that ends in success or silence. They listened, really listened. Not because I had rank, but because word had spread. They knew I was the one who'd flown into the canyon no one else would touch. Even if they didn't know all the details, they knew enough. Later that day, I sat in the observation lounge overlooking the runway. Seraph was still undergoing post-mission diagnostics, but I'd be back in her cockpit soon. The thought alone gave me a quiet thrill. Colonel Graves joined me, unexpectedly. "Training going well?" he asked. "They're sharp," I replied. "Eager. A little too reliant on clean answers." "That's what the regs teach them," he said. "Clean answers. Binary decisions. But combat isn't binary." I nodded. "You think they'll be ready next time the rules don't apply? That's why you're here." He handed me a folder, thicker than the ones I usually received. Inside, satellite data, threat assessments, psychological profiles. "What's this?" "A proposal," Graves said. "Joint NATO squadron. Multinational pilots trained in precision strike doctrine, unconventional profiles. You'd lead the air tactics wing." I blinked. "You're serious? You proved something up there. Something rare. You're not just a pilot, Ward. You're a tactician. The kind we need when the old methods fail." I let out a slow breath, staring out over the airfield. It wasn't what I'd expected. I thought redemption meant flying again, getting my seat back. But this was bigger. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about changing how we thought about flying. And maybe, just maybe, that was what I was meant to do all along. For every person who believed in what I was doing, there were 3 who didn't. They never said it outright. Not in briefings or meetings. But I saw it in the narrowed eyes of old guard colonels, in the clipped tones of mission planners who didn't like my name being on their files. To them, I was still the one who went rogue. Even now, with medals and sealed folders and generals alive because of a flight path that shouldn't have worked, I was a reminder that their rules didn't always hold. One afternoon, while finalizing air route sims for the new NATO Joint Squadron, I was pulled into a closed-door meeting with Air Command. 10 men in starched uniforms, and 1 woman. Brigadier General Lena Kovac, NATO liaison, and a stone-cold strategic genius. The table was lined with data packets and old doctrine manuals. "Captain Ward," said Major General Hanley, a voice like old gravel. "Your proposal includes low-altitude terrain masking through contested airspace, without drone overwatch. That is aggressive." "It's effective," I said evenly. "Our enemies adapt. They bury themselves behind false terrain data, jam our UAVs, and shoot down predictable paths. If we want to stay ahead, we need pilots who think around the doctrine, not just inside it." Kovac smiled faintly. Hanley did not. "And what happens when one of your unconventional thinkers pushes too far? Crashes a bird? Or worse, starts a diplomatic incident?" I met his stare. "We train them not to break rules, but to understand why they exist. And when those rules fail, we train them to adapt." He leaned back, unconvinced. I understood. To men like him, war was a grid, a predictable game of chess. But I'd seen what happened when the enemy flipped the board and started using fire instead of pawns. After the meeting, Kovac caught up to me in the corridor. "You held your ground well," she said. "I've had practice," I replied dryly. She studied me. "They'll never fully accept you, you know. You broke the unspoken rule that no matter how right you are, you don't get to be right alone." I nodded slowly. "Then I'll make sure no one else has to be." That night, I stayed late in the sim bay. One of the new recruits, a Polish pilot named Lieutenant Novak, had run a canyon dive 3 times in a row and crashed all 3. He was frustrated. I could see it in his stance, the tightness of his jaw. "You're looking at the terrain as an enemy," I told him, stepping beside the console. "Stop fighting it. Let it carry you." He looked at me, confused. "Read the wind. Feel the walls. Your jet is a language. If you're listening, it'll tell you what it wants." On his 4th run, he made it through clean. He didn't cheer, just nodded slowly, a private victory. And I realized, this was the work. Not just dodging missiles and outwitting death, but teaching others how to write their own skybound stories, without crashing halfway through the page. It wasn't a missile that came for me next. It was a memo, classified, marked urgent, and slid under my office door while I was deep in a terrain analysis session with the NATO candidates. It bore 2 stamps, one from U.S. Air Command and the other from the Allied Joint Force Headquarters. Subject: Operational Review of Mission Red Echo. My blood went cold. I read the document once, then again. A formal inquiry into the legality of the Tehran strike. Not the tactics, the authorization. Apparently, someone higher up was asking whether Colonel Graves had the authority to clear me for flight while I was under disciplinary review. Whether my strike had compromised Allied airspace protocol. Whether the mission had, in short, been too successful without enough paperwork to explain it. It was political. It was inevitable. By the end of the day, Graves and I were both summoned to a private inquiry session. 3-star panel. High security. No press. Graves looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Not nervous, just weighed down. "You know this was coming," he said as we walked toward the operations chamber. "Yeah," I replied. "I just didn't think it would be so soon." He paused. "Ward, if this doesn't go well, they'll pin the whole thing on me. Say I let a rogue pilot go unsupervised. Strip my rank." I looked at him. "You didn't let me go. You trusted me. That's the difference." He gave a slow nod, but his eyes told me everything. This wasn't about whether we'd done the right thing. It was about who would pay for it being right in the wrong way. Inside the chamber, the panel grilled us for 2 hours. Why hadn't Graves waited for official clearance? Why hadn't I sought an override from Joint Command? Why didn't we follow the escalation chain? Graves took the heat without flinching. Every answer came back to one point. The situation left no time for delay. When they turned to me, the tone shifted. "Captain Ward, did you believe your actions represented the best interests of Allied forces, or your own desire for redemption?" I didn't blink. My record was never the point. 12 soldiers lived in Al-Qadr because I made the hard call. 2 generals lived in Tehran for the same reason. I wasn't chasing glory. I was preventing funerals. The room stayed silent for a long time after that. Eventually, they dismissed us, pending review and further interviews. As I walked out, Graves stayed behind. When I turned, he gave me a tired salute. "They'll take their time with this," he said, "and they might come down hard. Be ready." "I am." He smiled faintly. "That's the problem with you. You always are." The next morning, I returned to the sim lab. Not because I had to, because I needed to. The squad was waiting. Young, smart, eager, and suddenly a little more cautious, their eyes flicking to me like I might vanish at any moment. I raised a marker to the board and wrote in bold, red ink, "The rules are your frame, not your cage." "Lesson 1, I said. "Let's get to work." 2 weeks after the inquiry, I got the message. Encrypted. Direct from NATO command. Review concluded. Mission red Echo deemed justified under emergent wartime authority. No disciplinary action recommended. Commendation pending. Effective immediately, Captain Elise Ward is reassigned as lead tactics instructor, NATO Precision Response Wing. It didn't come with fanfare. Just a blinking cursor and the soft hum of my terminal. But it hit harder than any missile I'd ever dodged. I walked outside, into the late afternoon heat, and stared at the empty sky above the hangar line. Somewhere up there, thousands of feet above, was Seraph, running test circuits with a trainee pilot under supervision. I wasn't in the cockpit anymore. And maybe that was the point. Inside the classroom, I saw something that caught me off guard. Lieutenant Novak, the one who'd crashed 3 simulators in a row, was now standing at the front of the room, laser pointer in hand, walking the others through his canyon run. "The key wasn't the NAV marker," he said. "It was the crosswind near the 4th bend. If you're thinking too much, you'll miss it. If you're listening to the jet, it'll tell you." I stood in the doorway, invisible for a moment. He was teaching my lesson, and teaching it better than I had. Later that night, Rena found me at the edge of the base perimeter, sitting on a fuel crate under a sky so clear it hurt to look at. "You're quiet," she said. I shrugged. "Just thinking. About legacy." She chuckled. "You're 33. I don't mean age. I mean what we leave in the air when we stop flying it ourselves." Rena sat beside me. "You left fire," she said softly. "The kind that makes others want to fly toward it. That's not legacy. That's revolution." We sat there a long while, not saying much, just letting the silence stretch over us like the wings of something vast and unseen. When I finally stood, I looked up one last time. The sky no longer felt like a cage I'd been thrown out of. It felt like a canvas, and I had carved my signature across it in maneuvers no manual would ever teach. They'd call me reckless in closed rooms. They'd call me lucky in classified reports. But the ones who mattered, the ones who flew beside me, who learned what it meant to feel a jet instead of just fly one, they'd call me something else. Pilot. Author's note. Some pilots follow flight plans. Others write them mid-air with smoke trails and impossible turns. Captain Elise Ward was one of the latter. In the sky, it remembers.